All right, so big news on the campaign trail. RFK Jr., he's out. He has endorsed Donald Trump in the midst of decrying, amongst other things, seed oils and the processed foods and the general unhealthiness of our children. This is. I'm going to lay my cards on the table here. Here's how I saw the race about a week ago. A week ago, Biden was still in, or yeah, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, whatever. Biden was still in, Trump was in, and RFK Jr. was in. And the sense I got was that RFK Jr. was probably stealing a few more votes from the Biden-leaning voters than the Trump-leaning voters. But just in general, most third-party candidates are like, I don't want to vote for any of these guys. I'm probably just going to sit out if RFK Jr. is not here. Biden drops out. Harris is the nominee, and that instantly made it much worse for Trump because all of the people who were like, I can't vote for either of these guys now had a second option. They were like, okay, I can vote for Harris. And instead, he started very heavily siphoning votes off of Trump, which of course now leads to him dropping out of the race because apparently, Jim, did I understand correctly in his speech? They've been having back channel conversations with the Trump campaign for weeks now, not to attack each other. That they're just gonna, they're gonna kind of hang out and work together. His speech was rambling. It was, and it was terrible. And I'm excited to get him on the campaign trail for Donald Trump,
which apparently, according to background reporting, is going to happen. But he only made one reference to being in contact with Trump. But we have reporting, the Bulwark sources say that it's been a constant, back channel communication. But he was referring to some Stanford doctor who cares a lot about food safety and a young guy. And he's been talking and advising, in his words, Trump. And he said, would you like to talk to Trump? And I think that led to the leaked video phone call that we all saw with the kind of red background where they were talking about vaccines and all this other stuff. And I think Kennedy clearly had it like in his mind that Trump was going to be joining his campaign. But when the numbers didn't work out due to the 75 conspiracy theories we heard as to why that wasn't going to happen, he didn't want to play spoiler, in his own words, but yet is also here endorsing Donald Trump. But that was the conversation that was referenced. But this has been an ongoing Donald Trump Jr. led pressure campaign. Apparently also Tucker Carlson was referenced. Tucker was also,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, Tucker was in on the pressure to get him out, because I think your state of the race was correct. There were double haters. Harris became the nominee. A lot of those people went back home, and it really was only hurting Trump at this point. So,
Andrew, I want to one thing that really jumps out about RFK Jr. just as a presence in this race is the crankness of it all. Like here's the sad state of American politics is that I do think that there is a sizable crank portion of the vote. It is what helped Donald Trump get elected in 2016. He kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudged with him with a bunch of the Q stuff during his presidency. And then the most telling moment from RFK Jr.'s little concession, whatever this is, dropping out speech, was he said he called up the Harris campaign and they didn't want anything to do with him. And we're supposed to take that as a bad sign of the Harris campaign. And frankly, that's like the most qualifying thing I've heard from the Democrats so far in this whole case. Like, we're not going to meet with you because you're an insane person. You're a fucking loon and we want nothing to do with you. That sounds like a good thing to me, frankly.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things kind of going on here. And the one is that, and people talk about this, a lot, is there is just sort of this like growing level of just sort of anti-institutional, sort of iconoclastic distrust kind of across the board in American society, where fewer and fewer people feel like the people in any kind of control have their best interests at heart. More and more people think there's like some crazy nonsense going on. And that doesn't necessarily sort super well onto partisan lines, but Donald Trump obviously has been mainlining that energy, since 2016, and making it more and more of like a political movement. I mean, there's so much of that in the MAGA movement. And I think what RFK Jr. kind of represented for a long time in this race was sort of the iconoclastic political energy that was still a little too weird to kind of get right behind Donald Trump. It was not just kind of like sort of bland vanilla. The news media is too liberal, and the DC elites are out to maximize their own power, and they don't care about the forgotten man at home. It was like the seed oils are secretly poisoning everybody because they
big tobacco.
We don't
scientists
we don't eat
everywhere.
real food anymore. Chronic disease, childhood obesity, all of these things that are like genuine actual problems, but like that don't necessarily have a really obvious political solution. RFK had this kind of vision board of, well, we're going to start taking a real hard look at all this stuff, and he talked about all that stuff a lot today. And I think he was interesting as a presence because a lot of these guys who are cranks who also like didn't trust Donald Trump for one reason or another kind of got on board with him. But I think if you were going to fast forward to a point in time where he was going to drop out of the race, I don't think you could possibly have predicted anything other than this, because at the end of the day, different people get motivated about different sorts of this sort of institutional distrust, but it all kind of feels the same, right? It all kind of melts into one stew where the people in charge, you can't trust them, and that's why we got to shake this thing up and throw out the bums and put a guy like Donald Trump back in there. So I was not at all surprised that ultimately that's where he went with this.
Do you guys think that part of this comes from mainstreaming the Bernie bros? That in a different universe where they hadn't kind of been included in this Biden-Harris coalition, they would be more apt to stay with RFK longer rather than be double haters. I don't know. I just can't think that, of that coalition, they used to be, they're still fringy. They're further to the far left, but like most of them have just gone along with Biden rather than vote for Jill Stein or something like that.
Well, RFK is a very kind of traditional, weird, crunchy California sort. I know he's from New York and these, but there's a real like that type of person has existed for a long time in politics, and like usually they're kind of localized to Marin County, and we joke about the schools that like get outbreaks of measles because all the hippy dippy parents don't want to get their kids their shots. The fact that this is a spreading phenomenon is worrisome in and of its own right. But the other element here is that it really does. I mean, look, I like taking the RFK Jr. endorsement with all the weird anti-vax stuff that comes from it cuts the legs out of the single greatest, the single best thing that the Trump administration did, which was fast track the COVID vaccine, get that out to everybody. I swear to God, I sit there and I'm just like, my hands are up in the air and I'm like, what am I watching? What is this? How is this supposed to benefit him in any way, except for the fact that there is a significant number of really deranged people who really take the idea of seed oils poisoning the children very seriously. And if this does swing the election in any very real way, I have serious worries for our country. And I can't put it any other way. It's wild to me.
Well, I think to your point, like, what is Trump going to offer him? It sounds like there's some quid pro quo for some maybe health food job in the Trump administration and vetting of the scientists. But in the short term out in the campaign trail, they did say that they could disagree vociferously. Is that going to be Operation Warp Speed, or is Trump going to try and, he's never been a really effective or consistent messenger on that. Is he going to dial that back to kind of show them a little leg?
I would be shocked personally if this plays out the way that RFK kind of suggested it was going to play out in his remarks today. I mean, he was going on as though Donald Trump was sort of bringing him on as his like ideology czar, where he was going to like kind of mainline his entire policy program for all these seed oils and things like that. Which, by the way, RFK Jr. also was telling reporters that Donald Trump was going to do this for him back in 2016. He thought that he was going to be appointed to run the FDA.
He's choosing to trust him this time, he said. Good luck with that.
And he just completely he just kicked him to the curb, right? So I don't know why RFK thinks it's different this time around. But I also would be a little bit surprised to see Donald Trump really go far out of his way to give RFK anything for this. I mean, RFK has already given him the endorsement. Trump did not have to preload any sort of inching away from Operation Warp Speed or anything like that. And why would Trump do that? I mean, Trump has never apologized for anything he did under office in his whole life for any reason to anybody. And now he's going to do that to RFK for this thing that he actually did that was great.
Or just not talk about it.
A bunch of lives, right?
Or not talk about it at all. Just pretend it didn't happen.
And Trump has never really backed away from the COVID vaccines. I mean, we talk about mandates and whatever, but to this day, he still's like, yeah, no, I got my shots. They were great. I didn't get sick. We focus so much on the nutty seed oil vaccine, health, processed food, Cheetos, whatever stuff that we haven't talked at all about. The best part of the speech was when he talked about how if Harris gets in charge, the neocons are going to be in charge. They're going to be waging war in Ukraine, and there's not going to be any end to this war in Russia and Ukraine, which was very exciting to me to hear. Andrew, what was your takeaway from that portion of the speech? Which again was I couldn't quite see where he was going with it, except that it's a legitimate part of the Republican Party at this point, is very anti-Ukraine, is very pro-Russia, wants this war to end, and frankly wants Ukraine to lose it in the offing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's always so funny to hear that kind of thing, Bulwark constituency ascendant, Patriots in control. We're going all the way to the top. We're calling the shots for the Harris campaign from now on. I don't know. It's been a weird inversion, and I think this just kind of puts an exclamation point on something we've talked about a lot over recent months, where the kind of former sort of bipartisan foreign policy consensus about peace through strength and deterrence abroad and all of these things that used to be primarily a factor of the Republican Party, but bipartisan to a great degree. I mean, it is very primarily housed now within kind of Kamala Harris's Democratic Party, as we saw from the convention stage last week. Donald Trump had a weird relationship with that whole thing during his first term in office, because he makes a lot of dovish noises, but he would go along with, he'd order a military strike here or there, kind of vacillated back and forth between thinking that his generals had the right idea and thinking they were full shit on this, that, or the other thing. But I do think it spotlights what is actually a pretty significant break in terms of the next administration, right? Where Kamala Harris is promising basically this continuation with the Biden foreign policy in a lot of ways, and Donald Trump has gotten increasingly dovish with the kind of the selection of J.D. Vance as his running mate, and now this stuff with RFK. He seems to be leaning into it in a way that is stronger and more militant and more sharp edged than in the past.
Yeah. All right. So what's the bottom line here? Because the bottom line is this either helps Trump or it hurts Harris, or there's no effect. Because I think a large number of the third party voters are folks who just want nothing to do with either party. Anyway, I think this is generally true in most elections, and I think it probably remains pretty true now. Jim, what do you think? Who does this help? Who does it hurt?
I think it definitely helps Trump, because as I said earlier, I think that the after Biden dropped out, those Democrats went back home, and are supporting Kamala. But I had always presupposed he was never going to make it to election day, not Kennedy Kerr style, but make it as a candidate, that he was always going to withdraw, and he was always going to endorse Trump, or if not explicitly endorse Trump, kind of tap dance around it so that his people know to vote for Trump. So I don't think in the end it has any bombshell effect on I don't think anyone at the Bulwark didn't think that. I think we all thought he was going to drop out at some point. So I don't really see it having a huge impact in the polls. And I know La Civita and the Trump campaign have a memo out saying, this is 4 times the total that Biden won in Arizona by. He was always going to get those votes. So I don't think it's really going to change anything for the Trump campaign.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with Jim on the fundamental math problem there. Back when RFK was sometimes polling around 8 or 10%, there were a lot of people in that coalition who otherwise would have been Kamala Harris voters, but those Kamala Harris voters are the ones who have now left his coalition. His coalition is now much more lopsidedly Trump heavy. So in a world where he, for some reason, had stuck it out to the end, that world would have looked worse for Trump. But I think, as Jim says, not a whole lot of likelihood under any circumstances that was going to happen, and particularly because his coalition had become so lopsided, that exposed him to so much, that gave him so much more sort of exposure when it comes to like the alternative media and the conservative media that had been kind of propping him up for a long time. As soon as it became obvious that he was kind of standing in Trump's way, that was all evaporating very quickly, and it was going to become a lot more kind of prickly for him to even just try to campaign. So I think it's a good day for Donald Trump in kind of the short-term sense, but really just kind of a reversion to the mean of what we should have been expecting all along.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Though, I mean, again, if it gets him 20,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 30,000 votes in Pennsylvania, I don't know, who knows? Who knows? Okay, great. Well, that was a deranged speech. I love to see it. I like to see the cranks consolidate behind Donald Trump because that's where they belong. And I'm going to go out and eat some seed oils just out of spite.